In the twilight of the Roman Republic, when ambition and intrigue ruled the streets of Rome as much as laws and legions did, one man's name would come to dominate history: Gaius Julius Caesar, a name that still echoes through centuries, synonymous with power, conquest, and the transformation of a republic into an empire. His life was a blend of genius and arrogance, courage and cruelty, the very embodiment of Rome itself. Julius Caesar was born on July 12th in the year 100 BCE into a patrician family, the Julii, who claimed descent from the goddess Venus through her son Aeneas. Though noble in lineage, his family was far from wealthy. His father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, served as a modest governor in Asia, and his mother Aurelia came from a well-respected but not politically dominant family. Caesar's youth was shaped not by luxury, but by a Rome where power belonged to those who could command it in the forum or on the battlefield. When Caesar was a teenager, the Roman world was in turmoil. The Republic was a restless giant, torn between the populist reforms of the common people and the rigid conservatism of the Senate's elite. The greatest general of the age, Gaius Marius, was married to Caesar's aunt Julia, and that connection would thrust the young Caesar into dangerous political waters. Marius represented the populares, the faction of Rome that sought to empower the masses. Opposing him was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, leader of the Optimates, the Senate's staunch defenders of aristocratic privilege. When civil war erupted between Marius and Sulla, Caesar found himself on the wrong side of fortune. Sulla emerged victorious, and his vengeance was brutal. Lists of the condemned, the proscriptions were posted in the forum, allowing citizens to kill those named and claim their property. Caesar, as the nephew of Marius' wife and a known populist sympathizer, was marked for death. But he refused to abandon his beliefs or his dignity. Even when Sulla demanded that he divorce his wife, Cornelia, the daughter of one of Marius' key allies, Caesar refused. Sulla spared his life only after the intervention of powerful friends, remarking ominously, "In this Caesar there are many Mariuses." The dictator's prophecy would prove true. After his reprieve, Caesar left Rome and joined the army, where his natural talent for leadership quickly shone. Serving in Asia Minor and Cilicia, he distinguished himself in battle and won the civic crown, one of Rome's highest military honours, for saving the life of a fellow soldier in combat. Yet adventure soon found him again in the most unexpected way. On his voyage across the Aegean Sea, Caesar was captured by Cilician pirates. When they demanded a ransom of 20 talents, Caesar laughed and insisted they ask for 50, for surely, he said, they did not know the value of their prisoner. For weeks he lived among them as their equal, joking, writing poetry, and promising that when freed he would return and have them crucified. When the ransom was paid and he was released, he raised a small fleet, hunted down the pirates, and carried out his threat, though, in a gesture of Roman mercy, he had their throats cut before the crucifixion. Upon returning to Rome, Caesar entered politics. He began his rise as a skilled orator, famed for his persuasive speeches and sharp wit. He aligned himself with the populares faction, advocating for the rights of the poor and using public generosity to gain favour. His charm was magnetic, his debts enormous, and his ambitions limitless. Rome was a city that thrived on spectacle, and Caesar knew how to provide it. He climbed the cursus honorum, the traditional ladder of political offices, with remarkable speed. First as military tribune, then quaestor, aedile, and praetor. As aedile, he spent lavishly on public games and festivals, filling the streets with gladiatorial combat and grand parades. Though the expenses plunged him deeper into debt, They made him beloved by the people. The senators grumbled, but the crowds cheered, and in Rome, the applause of the masses could drown out the disapproval of the elite. Caesar's charisma and alliances propelled him forward, but he understood that alone he could only go so far. In 60 BCE, he forged one of the most powerful political partnerships in Roman history, the First Triumvirate. With him stood two men, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in the Republic. Together, they would dominate Roman politics, each serving his own interests, Pompey seeking land for his veterans, Crassus seeking new financial opportunities, and Caesar seeking power. To cement their alliance, Caesar gave his daughter, Julia, in marriage to Pompey, a union that brought genuine affection despite its political nature. With their support, Caesar was elected consul in 59 BCE, the highest office in Rome, but his consulship was anything but ordinary. He bypassed senatorial resistance and pushed through a series of popular reforms, redistributing land to veterans and the poor. His enemies accused him of tyranny, but the people saw him as their champion. At the end of his consulship, Caesar secured a proconsular command in Gaul, the vast and largely unconquered region that covered modern France and Belgium. It was meant as a stepping stone. It became his empire. For nearly a decade, Caesar waged war in Gaul, and his Commentari de Bello Gallico, his own account of the campaigns, immortalized his exploits. He faced tribes of fierce warriors, from the Helvetii in the Alps to the fearsome Belgi and the legendary chieftain Vercingetorix. Time and again, he demonstrated both tactical brilliance and ruthless determination. His legions crossed rivers, built bridges in days, and marched across entire regions faster than any army before them. At Alesia, in 52 BCE, Caesar faced his greatest challenge. Surrounded by a massive Gallic force, he ordered the construction of double fortifications, one wall to contain the enemy within, and another to repel reinforcements from without. Against impossible odds, Caesar triumphed. Vercingetorix was captured and later paraded in chains through the streets of Rome before being executed. By the end of the Gallic Wars, Caesar had expanded Rome's territory to the Atlantic Ocean and the English Channel. He was immensely wealthy, adored by his soldiers, and feared by his rivals. Yet his success had disrupted the balance of Roman power. Crassus had perished in a disastrous campaign against the Parthians, and Pompey, now the Senatus' favoured champion, had turned against his former ally. The triumvirate was dead. Rome was once again on the brink of civil war. In 49 BCE, the Senate, led by Pompey, demanded that Caesar disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. To do so would mean prosecution, exile, or death. Caesar refused. Standing on the banks of the Rubicon River, the boundary of his province, he faced the moment that would define history. The decision was clear. To cross the river was to commit treason. To stay was to surrender. Caesar turned to his men and uttered the immortal words, "Alia iacta est the die is cast." With a single step across the Rubicon, Caesar marched on Rome, igniting the final war of the Roman Republic. Pompey and the Senate fled the city, retreating to Greece, while Caesar swiftly secured Italy without a fight. In a dazzling campaign that spanned continents, he pursued Pompey across the Mediterranean. In Spain, in Greece, and finally in Egypt, Caesar's genius never faltered. At the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE, despite being outnumbered, he defeated Pompey's forces decisively. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking refuge, but met a grim fate assassinated on the orders of the young Pharaoh Ptolemy III. When Caesar arrived and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he is said to have wept. It was not pity alone, it was the recognition that the old world of Roman honour had died with him. In Egypt, Caesar became entangled in a new drama, the civil war between Ptolemy and his sister, Cleopatra. She was intelligent, ambitious, and dazzlingly charismatic. Legend tells that she had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence rolled in a carpet. Whatever the truth, Caesar was captivated. He supported Cleopatra's claim to the throne, and after a brief war on the Nile, she emerged victorious. Their union produced a son, Caesarion, though Rome would never fully acknowledge him. Caesar returned to Rome not as a conqueror of provinces, but as the master of the Republic. He was appointed dictator, first for a limited term, then for 10 years, and finally for life. He reformed the calendar, creating the Julian system that still underpins our modern year. He expanded citizenship, restructured debt, rebuilt cities, and planned vast public works. His vision was not merely military, but imperial, a Rome unified under efficient, centralized rule. Yet his accumulation of power alarmed many. The Senate, once the heart of Roman liberty, now stood as a ceremonial body beneath a single man. Caesar's arrogance did little to ease their fears. He accepted honours once reserved for kings. He allowed his statue to be placed among those of the gods, sat on a golden throne during public games, and even permitted his image to appear on Roman coins, a privilege never granted to a living man. Rumours spread that he intended to declare himself king, and for Romans who had expelled their last monarch centuries earlier, that word rex was an abomination. On the Ides of March, the 15th day of March, 44 BCE, the conspirators struck. Led by senators Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, men whom Caesar had once trusted, they resolved to end his reign in the name of liberty. That morning, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, begged him not to go to the Senate. She had dreamt of his statue bleeding from 100 wounds. But Caesar dismissed her fears, saying, "What is to be must be." As he entered the theatre of Pompey, where the Senate met that day, the conspirators surrounded him. The first blade struck his shoulder, and then came another and another. Caesar struggled, crying out in pain, until he saw Brutus, the man he loved as a son, among his attackers. "Et tu, Brute," he whispered, and with that he fell, lifeless, at the foot of Pompey's statue. The irony was complete. The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic. Instead, they had destroyed it. Rome erupted into chaos. The people who had adored Caesar turned on his killers. Mark Antony, his loyal ally, delivered a fiery funeral oration that roused the mob to fury. The assassins fled or were hunted down, but Caesar's death did not restore liberty, it paved the way for empire. In his will, Caesar named his grandnephew, Gaius Octavius, as his heir, adopting him as his son. The boy would become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The republic that Caesar had fought to control would die, and from its ashes the Roman Empire would rise, bearing the mark of his ambition forever. Julius Caesar's life was a paradox of greatness and ruin. He was both liberator and tyrant, visionary and despot. His genius reshaped Rome, but his pride destroyed the Republic. His reforms built the foundations of imperial government, but his assassination ensured that those foundations would serve not freedom, but monarchy. He crossed the Rubicon not just as a general defying orders, but as a man crossing the line between mortal and legend. More than 2 millennia have passed, yet his story remains as compelling as ever. Every ruler who seeks absolute power is measured against him. Every betrayal recalls his final words. His name became a title. Caesar passed from emperor to emperor and echoed through the ages in the words Kaiser and Tsar. In life, he conquered Gaul. In death, he conquered history. Julius Caesar's legacy is not just the empire he never ruled, but the idea he embodied that one man's ambition can reshape the destiny of the world. He was the storm that ended the Republic and the dawn that began an empire. His was a life lived at the edge of fate, where courage meets hubris and mortality reaches for immortality. Even now, as historians debate his motives and moralists judge his means, one truth remains undeniable. Julius Caesar changed the course of human civilization. The Republic fell, but Rome endured, and through Rome so did he. The calendar we follow, the words we speak, the power structures that shape our politics all carry echoes of Caesar. He was not merely a man of his time, he was a man ahead of it. His story is a mirror of ambitions, promise and peril, the eternal reminder that greatness often walks hand in hand with downfall. From the narrow streets of ancient Rome to the fields of Gaul, from the banks of the Rubicon to the Senate floor where he fell, Julius Caesar's shadow stretches across history. He was Rome's greatest general, its most daring politician, and its most enduring legend. The man who sought to master the Republic became the symbol of its end. Yet in that end, he gave birth to something greater, the Roman Empire, and a legacy that time itself has never conquered.